Hello and welcome once again to the Comics and More podcast. I'm Patrick.
And I'm David. And this week we are going to be talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer's comic form, as well as a little touch on a comic that is just ending at the end of the show too. But first we're going to start out talking about Buffy the Vampire Slayer's Season 8, which we haven't really talked about on here before. And they've been releasing these really cool library editions that Patrick is very proud of having.
Mm-hmm.
They have really pretty covers. Nice and thick volumes here too. And the pages are just really big, so the art looks really nice in here. That's the first volume. A second volume has come out, as well as a third volume that we don't have quite yet. Somebody's hoping for that for Christmas. Alright, so what did you think about Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8?
Season 8, which is the one that immediately followed up on the TV series, and is now being collected in these 4 volumes. I liked it. I thought it was good. I mean, you and I were both huge fans of the television show. Mm-hmm. I mean, we really loved Buffy. Yep. I think we can speak for both of us on that. We're like big fans of it. So it's several years ago now, but I was really excited when Joss Whedon announced that he would be overseeing the official continuation of the television series, which ran for 7 seasons, of course, in comic book form with Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 8. Mm-hmm. So it's just really exciting to see what he would do with the characters. And, it's kind of interesting that we haven't talked about it really before now on the podcast. But, it's fair to say it's a comic you probably have to come into it being a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I don't think there's anyone who is probably just a comic book fan who, would enjoy them just as comic books without having a particular interest in Buffy. Yeah. That would be weird. They're well done comic books, but they're not, you know what I mean? They're for fans of the TV show.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of fans of the TV show.
Mm-hmm.
The comic book has been really successful.
Yeah.
So a lot of the season 8 stuff ended up being somewhat controversial among fans, I think. Mm-hmm. I basically liked the approach that they took, though. In the final episode of the Buffy the Vampire Slayer TV show, they really kind of radically changed the status quo in a way that it would not have allowed them to really go back to the way things had been for the bulk of the show's run. Mm-hmm. Or at least not go back immediately. Buffy and her friends on the television show essentially changed the world in that final episode. And what they changed it into was a more comic book type world. It was a really great twist in the final episode, I thought, with Buffy deciding to share her power with hundreds of girls all over the world, so that instead of there being one Slayer, there were hundreds of Slayers. So that seems like more of a comic book premise than this smaller kind of street level group that they had on, the relatively low budget television series that Buffy the Vampire Slayer was. So I thought it was kind of a good fit to really embrace that concept and evolve the story of Buffy the Vampire Slayer into this big kind of global superhero epic with the unlimited budget that comic books provide. Mm-hmm. But that aspect of it, I think not all fans of the television show, at least if the letters pages and various blog posts are any indication, were completely on board with. They kind of wanted Buffy to be like Buffy had been for 7 years on television, which is a legitimate, expectation, I suppose.
But now it is a superhero comic book, so it's going to be different. So.
Well, it's a comic book. I don't know that it needed to be a superhero comic book.
Yeah, but it certainly made sense to go in that direction.
I thought so.
I think it was largely successful. One thing that I didn't connect with Season 8 of Buffy very well either, but I don't think it was because it was a comic book or that it was more superhero-y. I just felt like it was like they were catering to the fans a little too much with I mean, like, every single, like, story arc, like, had, like, oh, here's this character back. Oh, remember this character? Oh, here's this character. It was just over and over again with these cameos, and it felt like that was the whole thing. Like, surprise, this person's in it now.
Mm-hmm.
Surprise, this person's behind this. And it was just like, it just got a little tired over the entire run.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, you gave the fans what you wanted. Their favorite characters you got to see throughout the entire run. But it was just like, it was just a little too repetitive.
There was a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
The very first issue, I mean, I still remember I was just so excited to read that comic book when it first came out. And the last page revealed that Amy, a supporting character from the show who had started as a hero and started to become a villain, was alive, and, you know, she was going to show up in the comic book, and she was revealed on the last page, and it was a big surprise. But you're right, they kind of relied on that a bit too much. A few too many of those final pages were, you know, this character you thought was dead, or this character you haven't seen for a long time is back and in a new form, and all that kind of stuff. So that's a minor gripe. I do think another thing, too, one thing that I think they did kind of get wrong is that it was a bit of an unwieldy story.
Yes.
I mean, they tried to do a very large story, which is fine, but it was unwieldy in the sense that in Season 8, Joss Whedon has the title of executive producer, which is his title on the television show, of course, and is really a television term, although I've seen it show up now in other comic books since Buffy Season 8.
Yeah.
Like, I think Marvel has an executive producer of their books. But essentially that means he was kind of like creatively overseeing the storylines and helping develop them, even if he wasn't directly writing all of the issues, although he did directly write many of the issues in Season 8. But it was handled by a variety of writers, some from comic books, like Brian K. Vaughan, and some from the television series. And the whole thing ran for about 40 issues, so it took several years to tell this big story, and it kind of lost focus a little bit. Like the second arc, which was all about Faith, a supporting character from the show, it really had Buffy in it very, very little, and it didn't really tie in directly with the overarching story, and that happened a lot in Season 8. They were just kind of going in all these different directions, so it really kind of lost focus and coherency, which they've really, I think, tried to correct in Season 9. So for me, that kind of lack of focus and the kind of unwieldy nature of Season 8 was, probably the thing that I enjoyed the least about it. I wish they had kept it a little tighter. But I still did really enjoy it. I liked the story that they were telling. I was into the whole Twilight thing. I was surprised by the identity of Twilight. I thought that was all handled really well. And I think the comic book, for me, was at its best when the characters were acting in character, but they were being pushed into new and surprising situations. Xander and Dawn, for example, two characters from the television show who had a platonic friendship, became romantically involved over the course of this series. I like that kind of thing, So I think I didn't mind that it was different than the TV show, but I do think that Season 8 was a bit unwieldy.
All right. Should we talk about Season 9?
Sure.
All right.
So Season 8 was a huge success. So of course they followed up with Season 9.
Yep. And obviously the main series is Buffy the Vampire Slayer Season 9.
Yeah.
And following the events of Season 8, which basically had Buffy cut the Earth off from magic. So they're in this world where things are different now. The game has been changed.
Yeah, it's kind of the reverse of what happened at the end of Season 7 of the TV show, whereas Buffy empowers all of these Slayers all over the world. At the end of the Season 8 comic book, she severs the world from magical influence, essentially. So that magic doesn't really exist in this universe anymore in the way that it used to. So it's a less fantastic, less comic booky, less magical world.
Mm-hmm.
And Buffy is no longer in charge of all these Slayers. The Slayers are still around, but no new ones will be called. Vampires have been altered by this.
Yep.
So it's the very different kind of status than what we went into season 8 with, and it's one that I think they felt would help them get back to that kind of street level, kind of back to basics approach that they seem to be taking in season 9.
Yeah, and they have introduced, like, I feel like more like characters for the comic book that they've just created for the series. Like there's a police officer.
Dowling.
Yep, and there's Billy, the boy Slayer. So, I mean, I feel like they're trying to introduce characters instead of just relying on characters from the TV show and such. But, I mean, there are characters like Spike and stuff who make appearances throughout Buffy. That's just kind of the world she lives in, I feel like.
Mm-hmm. Well, you don't want to not have those characters.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, those are the characters of the,
But one of the more successful things they've done with Season 9 is they've had these spin-offs. Where fans do get what they want. They want to see their favorite characters. So... they've had miniseries featuring other characters, and they have another ongoing series, which is Angel and Faith.
Right. Yeah, so season 9 they took a really different approach. It's both bigger and smaller than what they did in season 8. And in a lot of ways, I do think season 9 is better.
I think it's much better.
Yeah, and you can kind of see season 8 in retrospect as something of a shakedown cruise. So I think they're kind of eliminating what didn't work and enhancing what did. So it's smaller in the sense that it's not going to be as long. Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and Faith, the 2 books, are only going to run 24 issues. But there's more books, right? There's 2 regular series, Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel and Faith, and then they're doing these various satellite miniseries like Spike, A Dark Place, and Willow, Wonderland, which helps the main book to stay focused on the stories they're telling, but also, allowing them to explore various corners of the universe. So they're kind of able to have it both ways. So it's a little bit more coherent and consistent.
And I feel like each of the books has has a better focus. Like Angel and Faith, it's like Giles is dead, so Angel and Faith, I mean, what they want to do is they want to resurrect Giles, and that's the focus of that book. So everything they're pretty much doing is to that end.
Yeah.
And Spike, I mean, we see him in a very different role than we've seen him in the past. He's kind of like leading. He has a spaceship with these space cockroaches. He's kind of a leader, and they're almost like a strange family. But you get to see him have an adventure with that aspect of his life instead of relying on Buffy. And Willow's going through her own thing just because she's cut off from magic, and she's seeking a way to kind of change that again.
Yep.
So I mean they all have their own focus. I feel like. Again, Buffy, I feel like, is the one that's a little more unfocused than the other ones.
Yeah, ironically, that's part of the theme of season 9 for the Buffy comic book, is that she as a character doesn't have focus in her life. She's no longer a leader of this Slayer army. She's got kind of a dead-end job at this coffee shop in San Francisco when the series opens. So she's sort of directionless and kind of dealing with a lot of real life issues, which is similar to the season 6 of the TV series, which a lot of people didn't like that either. So it's kind of an interesting approach to take. Angel and Faith is kind of emerged as the better series.
Yeah.
Another thing they're doing different too is that they just, for the most part, have had a single writer on each of the main series. So Joss Whedon wrote himself. He's still executive producer of all this, but he himself wrote the first issue of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. But Andrew Chambliss took over with issue number 2, and he has been the regular writer on the series and will remain so until it wraps up. With the exception of the 2-part Billy the Vampire Slayer story arc, which was written by Jane Espenson and Drew Greenberg, a couple writers from the show. And Angel and Faith is written by Christos Gage with art by Rebecca Isaacs. Buffy is drawn by Georges Genti, who also drew season 8,
Mm-hmm.
which we didn't mention. I forget
And then you have like Jeff Parker
that.
doing Willow and Victor Gischler. I'm not sure who that is doing Spike. Yeah. I know one of the Buffy arcs that I liked the best, I think, was when she was with Kennedy and she was trying out to be like a bodyguard. I thought that was like, it was actually kind of a smart thing. Like if Buffy's going to do anything with her life, like a bodyguard makes sense. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was the best arc too. I didn't really care for Kennedy on the show. But I don't know, it kind of worked, like their dynamic and stuff.
I like that. I mean, I've liked the Buffy comic, but I can see why people are kind of frustrated with it because another thing too is that with all these like companion series and spin-off series, you know, like Spike, he was in the Buffy comic, but now he's off on his own. Mm-hmm. Willow's not around; she's doing her own thing in her own comic book. Obviously, Angel and Faith are in their own comic book. Mm-hmm. So the supporting cast, which really was a big part of that show, you know, that kind of like surrogate family of Buffy and her friends, that's not really there this season. Mm-hmm. Xander and Dawn have kind of been in the background, supposedly with this new story arc they're going to come into focus now, and we'll kind of find out what's been going on with them. But it's kind of been Buffy on her own, which is not necessarily something that, you know, people like to see. You know, I mean, one thing that makes Buffy Buffy is that she, you know, tries to be a Slayer and have friends and have a normal life, and it's always kind of been that struggle that's really defined her, and made her different from just like the average Slayer. So I think, you know, kind of moving some of that supporting cast onto other books has maybe hurt the main Buffy book a little bit. But I mean, I'm just so interested in these characters, and I've been following them for so long, and I was such a fan of the show that it's just, I'm always interested in seeing what's going on with them. So I do like the Buffy comic overall. I think it's really good. And I did like the arc with her and Kennedy. I liked the robot arc where she was in a robot's body. I liked that one. I thought that was probably the best one. And they've tackled some like kind of like real life issues in this one. There are a couple of like pretty highly publicized stories have gone down in season 9. They got a lot of attention for the abortion issue, where Buffy found out that she was pregnant, and essentially over the course of like an entire issue, it was a very introspective issue, decided to have an abortion. And what did you think of the way that topic was handled? It's certainly not something that's broached a lot in mainstream comics.
I don't know. I was kind of indifferent to that issue, frankly.
It didn't do anything for you?
It didn't do anything for me. How about you?
Yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was well handled. I liked that they were kind of bold enough to go there.
Yeah.
Some people felt, I think, that it was sort of undercut by the revelation that, in fact, Buffy was not pregnant and she was a robot and all this kind of stuff. But for me, that doesn't really take away from the decision that she made at the end of that issue. You know, they didn't set out to write a story about a girl having an abortion or a girl having a baby or dealing with the consequences of either of those things. Joss Whedon really wanted to tell a story about how that decision is arrived at and why that decision is arrived at and how Buffy would deal with that. So I thought that they found a way to insert that kind of real life issue into a comic book science fiction world, and have it really ring true on an emotional level, even though, you know, you're talking about robots and, you know, vampires and things like that the next issue. So I like that. The other thing that's gotten a lot of attention is not a lot of attention, but the introduction of the character Billy, who is the first gay male regular character in the Buffy universe, which I think is something that Buffy fans have wanted for a long time, and it seems like Joss Whedon would have gotten around to that by now. They've
hinted at some characters like
Andrew, and of course, you know, like Willow was a very prominent gay character on TV when that wasn't as common as it is now. But it just did always seem like there should be like a gay male character in this world that Joss Whedon had created, and he never really introduced that in Buffy. So they came up with this idea of Billy, who is they call him a vampire slayer, but he's not really a vampire slayer. He's basically just a kid who decides that he wants to fight these new vampire zombie hybrids that they've got in season 9. It's called zompires. And kind of like trains himself, or he and his boyfriend kind of train him, kind of like Batman style, to fight these guys, and he decides he wants to join up with Buffy, and she allows him to do that. And
and he kind of took over Buffy for a couple issues.
Yeah. So what did you think of the introduction of Billy?
It was fine. Again, nothing that, really... I don't know. Like it was well executed, but it just didn't really thrill me. I don't know. Just like... I don't know. Just like Buffy has like I said, that one story arc with Kennedy I think was like really solid and really stood out compared to the other ones, which were good, but nothing like Angel and Faith. Easily the standout. I think Buffy's being overshadowed by Angel and Faith because that one is so consistently really well written and it's great.
Cool.
What do you think?
I don't know that Angel and Faith is so much better than Buffy. Yeah, I mean, I think they're both good.
I like the art a lot better too. I don't know. Like I think just everything about Angel and Faith is superior to Buffy this season.
Yeah, it's a really solid book.
It's the really best thing to come out of Buffy and comics. Period. I feel like.
Yeah, that might be. I mean, I might agree with you. To me, there's not a huge. I mean, I enjoy Angel and Faith, and I kind of enjoy all the.
I mean, like you said before, Buffy is alone on her own, and Angel and Faith have a really cool dynamic.
Yeah.
And I like this quest for Giles, and they just introduce a lot of like cool elements into it that are.
I mean, it's set in London. It's a really cool.
Yeah. But I mean, even going back, having Connor in it, and going back to.
That was a really good arc.
Yeah, going back home to his home, like where he grew up, having Drusilla in it, and having Faith confront her her issues with her father. I mean, there's just a lot of like really good, solid emotional stuff in there. And Buffy, I just feel like doesn't really have that emotional punch to it or something.
Yeah, you're right. I agree. Right. I mean, it's not. I mean, Angel and Faith isn't the best comic book I'm reading, and. So to say that it's like so much better, I mean, to me they're close, but you're right. I mean, I agree with all that. I do think Angel and Faith does all that stuff better than the Buffy comic book. But to me, it's not like a vast chasm.
I think it is
what I mean?
Pretty vast, but that's me.
So you don't really like Buffy?
I like Buffy, but it's not one I look forward to reading every week. When Angel and Faith comes out, I'm like, oh yes, a good Angel and Faith. But Buffy, I'm just like, that can stay in my pile for a while before I get to it.
See, it's probably just something about the characters and the fact that like I'm just so invested in what happens to the characters. There's something about the Buffy book that makes it seem as though it's the main book. So I'm just always interested to see what's going on there, even though it doesn't always pay off, I guess. I mean, if I was evaluating it. I mean, I really like evaluate these comics are hard to review for me. It's like I think maybe that's part of the reason we haven't talked about on the podcast is like, I mean, I can usually be a pretty objective like critic. I mean, I love the Fantastic Four as a kid, but if I read a bad Fantastic Four comic, I have no problem in seeing it as a bad comic. I mean, these aren't bad comics, but I can't completely evaluate them just as comics. Like I just can't, separate myself from like my interest in the characters from the TV show. So, I don't know where I was going with that, but I guess that interest in the characters keeps me invested in the Buffy comic book beyond what it's maybe earned on its own as a comic book. That makes sense.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. Sure.
Like if it was just a comic book with new characters and this story, I probably wouldn't have stuck with it. But since I am invested in the characters, like it keeps me interested. I don't know. I kind of trailed off there.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Well, what I was going to say about Billy, though, is I was a little disappointed in the Billy arc because I'm glad Billy's there. I like him as a character, and I'm glad there is a gay male Slayer. I think that's really cool. So I'm glad he's there, but the way they introduced him is kind of like the one time they veered off from what they're trying to do with season 9 and keep the individual books really focused, It was the only time the focus was really taken completely off of Buffy, and we just got this new character who came out of nowhere and basically just decided that he was going to join Buffy's group and become, a Slayer. And, we've never seen a character come into Buffy's world that way. All of the characters that were introduced during the course of the TV series or the comic books have really come to be a part of the book in a really organic way. And Billy is the sole exception to that. Mm-hmm. So it really made it seem as though we need to have a gay male character in this book, and that's like his reason for existing. Mm-hmm. So I wish they could have found a way to introduce Billy in a way that was more organic to the story, rather than just like putting the brakes on the story, introducing this completely new character, and then just kind of having him be in the mix from there on out. Yeah. I don't know how exactly they would have done that. Mm-hmm. I mean, I said to you, I thought like Billy actually would have been a good miniseries because it was such a separate story what introduced him, but you're right, like nobody would buy that because nobody knows who this character is and has ever heard of him. And
I mean, they could have somehow involved like the story of what was going on with, Buffy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like have Billy be a kid who like she saved or who saved her, or he really stands out as a character in that way, in that he just came out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. Whereas everyone else, like Dowling, the police officer character, really just kind of grew out of the story and kind of slowly and organically is drawn into Buffy's circle. Mm-hmm. Billy just basically decided he was gonna, be a part of Buffy's world, and she pretty easily accepted him. I mean, I don't ever remember that happening with any other character. So, but I don't want to rag on it too much because, like I say, I'm really glad Billy's there, and I hope he, develops and continues to develop into a great character.
He's kind of a boring character too right now. It's just like it's a gay character, and that's kind of that's the defining quality, and that's like all there is to it right now. So I guess that's why it didn't leave much of an impression on me. It's just like, what do I care?
Yeah, I do kind of think it's interesting, though, to have a character who doesn't have powers and who wants to fight because of the mission and because it's the right thing to do, as opposed to, like, Xander, who was, like, Buffy's friend and had a crush on Buffy and was just kind of, reluctantly drawn into this kind of world. Mm-hmm. And all the other characters have various powers and abilities. Mm-hmm. I think it's potentially interesting to have a character like Billy, and he's younger than Buffy is now, so can be kind of like a protege. So I think he's a potentially interesting character. I just think that I wish his introduction had been handled differently. And honestly, I like that there's a gay male character in Buffy. Mm-hmm. It's something that I do think. I think Buffy has a lot of gay fans, and I think it's something that the book was missing.
Yeah,
so,
it makes sense to have.
Yeah, so I wish they had found a more elegant way to introduce him. Yeah. But I'm looking forward to what they'll do with him. Mm-hmm. They'll hopefully they don't kill him off. But who knows? So, but yeah, so there's not a lot to go in season 9. I think each book is in its kind of penultimate arc right now. Mm-hmm. So we'll be wrapping it up in 6 months or something like that. Mm-hmm. So yeah, definitely check out Buffy season 8 in collected form, and Buffy season 9.
Mm-hmm. Especially Angel and Faith.
Especially Angel and Faith, which is currently being serious. Well, do you think Angel and Faith would be of interest to people who have no particular interest in the Buffy or Angel
the thing is, like,
shows, or is it not?
With these comics, they definitely, you can get what happened, like, you get the past of, like, what's going on in the books. I feel like Angel and Faith more than the other ones. Mm-hmm. But just because so much is going on in Buffy, it's kind of hard to keep track a little bit. Mm-hmm. But I don't know. I think it's a solid comic book where I don't know if Buffy really is, if it doesn't rely on the other things. You know what I mean? So I don't know, though. It's hard to say. I can't, like you said, you can't really separate yourself. I can't really separate myself either. But I feel like that one would I feel like that is just a solid comic book.
If any of them were going to win people over who weren't like necessarily Buffy fans or huge Buffy fans, it would probably be Angel and Faith.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. I think it is probably the best thing that's come out of it. But I like the rest of it too. I like it all. Yeah. It's all good. Mm-hmm. So.
Okay.
All right. Well, there we go.
Well, let's move on from Buffy, and we're going to talk about something that just wrapped up. Uncanny XForce from Rick Remender.
And I feel like I should make a claim that this will be my last time talking about Uncanny XForce on this podcast. So I think for like the last 6 episodes at least, I've mentioned Uncanny XForce. I think I talk about it like ever.
All the time.
Yeah, all the time. I mention it like sometimes it's a brief mention, but I think I mention it in like every episode.
But I mean, it's
wrapped up. This is the end of the run.
Yep, it's over.
Of course, there's a new Uncanny XForce #1 coming out, but this is the end of Rick Remender's run on this book, and we really liked it, so it seemed fitting to note its passing. Marvel's doing their Marvel Now, so they're launching all these #1 issues, and that's really exciting right now. So I think it's easy for some of the wrap-ups to the previous runs to be overshadowed a little bit. So we wanted to make note of the final issue of Remender's Uncanny XForce. So what do you think of this final issue? It's like the 12th part of this long final execution.
Yeah, Rick Remender does a lot of these really long runs.
I like
of
that.
Comics. I do like it too, actually.
It's fun.
And I mean, like the ending, like you kind of like were hoping for a certain kind of ending, and you got that ending, and I think you were very happy about that.
I was. Yeah. Well, because so many horrible things happened to Psylocke. Horrible things happened to all of these characters. Did horrible things to people, and horrible things happened to them, like throughout just horrible throughout the run of this book. But Psylocke, especially, she was forced to kill her brother. Her 2 lovers throughout the series were killed. She was stripped of her emotions at one point or something. Yeah. I didn't quite understand that part, but it was just like horrible ththings kept happening to Sally.
Like over and over.
And she was always the most conflicted about the whole X-Force mission. So I thought, I said, I really hope in however this storyline comes out, the end of X-Force is a happy ending for Psylocke. And that is exactly what Rick Remender did. So I thought he nailed that just perfectly. And I thought the way that they wrapped up the whole Evan as Apocalypse arc was satisfying.
Yep, and that's how it started, X-Force, with that. So it's
nice talk
to
about
see...
a consistent run. Yeah. I mean, you can really sit down and read now that it's finished X-Force from beginning to end. And I mean, you can see how it was all planned from the beginning. He really did a nice job just kind of tying it all together. This is a great book.
Yep. Great book overall.
Yep. I think it's kind of too bad that I think they kind of dropped the ball artistically a little bit at the end, though.
Yeah.
I didn't love Phil Noto as the artist on this. I feel like they just kind of put him in there because the artists who began the book have moved on to their new Marvel Now assignments. And Noto just has this really kind of generic style, whereas X-Force started out with a really unique look with Jerome Opeña's
I wish he'd been the entire time.
Oh, yeah.
I didn't really care for
even
the art in the other
some
room.
of the other artists they had following him, though, they had Assad Rabiq come in and do an arc. I mean, these are great artists.
Yeah.
Opeña is now doing Avengers, and Rabiq is now doing Thor, God of Thunder. Is that what that book is called?
Yep.
It's hard to keep up all these adjectives straight. So I wish that they would have been able to. I mean, not to knock Phil Noto necessarily, but I just feel like he has kind of a bland artistic style, especially when you remember what this book looked like when it first began. So I thought that was kind of a shame.
I didn't mind Phil Noto, but
yeah, but when you go back and look at those early issues, you really
it had a look.
It had a look to it, and it had a feel to it, and Remender's writing was rock solid throughout, but it's a shame that they kind of dropped the ball artistically a little bit, which I don't know. It's just always a frustration with mainstream comics for me. It's just it's hard to get an artist to commit or get. It's not even about the artist. It's more about like the editors and the publishers making these decisions. I think they probably look at the fact that, this issue, Phil Noto drawing Uncanny XForce probably sells just as well as Assad Rabiq or Jerome Opeña drawing Uncanny XForce, but I think that's a bit of a false way of looking at it because, they've got to realize, like, this is a continuing story. So if you're invested in the story, you're sort of, forced to like buy every issue regardless of who's drawing it, even though it might kind of bother you. You don't want to be lost in the story. So I don't really know what the solution is. But But I like when even if I don't like the artist, I appreciate when it seems as though some thought has been put behind the artwork of a comic book, and the art is not just there to get across the story. Like the art is the story.
But not everybody can be like a Mark Bagley and turn out pages like
no, but I think there's ways to get around that. Like I think at the
Yeah.
beginning of Uncanny XForce, Jerome Pena was not able to remain on as regular artist, but I think
they found a good replacement.
a good replacement who had that same kind of style,
Yeah.
and Dean White as the colorist helped maintain that
Yeah.
consistent look.
Yeah.
Or like another book I mentioned in every episode, Wolverine and the X-Men. For a long time, they had the two artists, Chris Bachalo and is it Nick Bradshaw, that other guy who draws kind of like Arthur Adams, who I really like. I like them both. They have really different styles, but it was always one of those two drawing it, and they were both really great. So that helped establish.
I think that's a good way to go. Like I'd like to see more of that, just like switching off between.
And now Bachalo is leaving Wolverine and the X-Men.
Yeah,
I'm sad about.
I prefer the other guy, anyways.
Do you?
Yeah.
I like Bachalo. I've always liked Bachalo, but we've talked about that. That book is really good right now too.
I haven't read the latest arc.
Yeah, the latest arc is really good, where they've introduced some new characters. There's new mutants now in the universe, and they're going up against Frankenstein's monster and this kind of group of sideshow freaks and circus performers. So these guys are fighting the X-Men, and it's this weird kind of horror comedy. It's really, really good. I'm just consistently impressed with that book as well. So, that's one too that, should not be overshadowed by all of the new number ones that Marvel has
Well,
been
I mean,
putting
Marvel's keeping that going for a reason, because it really works,
Yeah.
And people like it.
Yep. I do. I like it a lot. So
a lot of people do.
Yep, so no more Uncanny X-Force, but it was a great run, and I know Remender said he's going to follow up a lot of the storylines from this book in his new work on Uncanny Avengers.
Yep.
So, that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's about it.
So
no more talking about Uncanny X-Force in the future, but
I'm gonna try
check it out if you haven't.
But I'm probably going to mention Wolverine and the X-Men in every episode.
Probably.
All right. That's it.
Yep, thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Bye now.